participate in the conversation. So thank you again for making time. This is a special meeting time that we set aside for this conversation. We do have a hard stop right at 11 o'clock, so I hope everybody can keep that in mind. With that, Paki, if you don't mind, dive in, and we're moving to item 2.
Point of order. I think it'd be of value, are all the TAC members here that are going to be here to have them sit at the table as opposed to not?
They're at the table.
So not all 6
Well, they're online. They're online.
folks that are here.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'm having a hard time hearing you, just FYI. Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead, Paki. We are ready to move on to item 2.
Good morning, everyone. And first, I just want to thank the TMC and CAC representatives that are here for their flexibility to have this meeting working group this morning, and also for providing the information on such a tight turnaround that we'll be going over today. So thanks for everybody's collaborative teamwork. What I wanted to do is in your packets, and for those of you here in the room at your table, we provided 4 items for you to respond to last week. All of the jurisdictions did respond. So thank you again for that quick turnaround. And I'll be going over these questions individually, but in a nutshell, at the last TMC meeting, they requested that jurisdictional members review the list of the 37 named projects that were approved by the CAC and provide responses to the questions. The questions included providing your opinion on how each of the groups, the capacity enhancement, modernization, operational, and new roadway projects, how they were ranked in order of priority. We asked you to review the projects listed as your jurisdiction's lead or co-lead and make sure that they were appropriately scoped. We also asked you to identify any of your jurisdiction projects that could be removed or moved to maybe a categorical element. And then we asked you to prioritize your jurisdiction's projects with one being the highest. So as you know, today's goal is to refine the draft list to bring it within budget. We still have $290 million over budget. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish today, is to remove that overage. The ad hoc TMC working group, just as a reminder, are jurisdictional members of the TMC, 1 member from each jurisdiction, and then invited representatives from the CAC that are here today. And you'll be asked to review, provide feedback, and discuss and refine the draft list of named projects. So I tried to match the presentation to your charts, but for the first question, we asked everybody to provide their opinion on how each of the 4 groups could be ranked in order of priority. So as you can see on the left are all of the jurisdictions that responded. Just to point out, the Tohono O'odham Nation did not submit any projects, but we wanted to make sure they're included in this conversation, and they'll always be represented. So that's why their area is blank. But these were the responses that we received in order of priority. And the way it shook out was capacity enhancement turned out to be the #1 priority. Operational was the 2nd. New roadway projects was 3rd. And then modernization was the 4th ranked priority. For the second question, we asked jurisdictions to review the projects listed as your jurisdiction's lead or co-lead and confirm that each project was appropriately scoped and placed in the best suited of the 4 categorical groups. Most of the jurisdictions said that yes, all of the projects were properly scoped and in the correct group. And then I had a few of the jurisdictions make some changes. So the City South Haspe Yaqui and the City South Tucson, since they only have 1 project each, they both confirmed that those projects were scoped appropriately and in the correct operational category for both. The town of Sahuarita had 2 projects, and they also wanted to bring up that they may want to have additional consideration on the Sonoran corridor, and that's something that you all can discuss today. The town of Marana said all of their projects were properly scoped, and they did recommend moving the 2 traffic interchange projects under the capacity enhancement category. So in the spreadsheet that you also received, the items in red are those that were moved to the new grouping. Pima County sponsored and co-sponsored projects were also appropriately scoped. And they did have one recommendation to move the Drexel number 472 project to a new grouping. I believe it was under capacity enhancement. The city of Tucson, they did want me to point out that the South Country Club project was submitted by the Tucson Airport Authority, and they were not the submitting agency, but that the remaining city of Tucson projects are correct and appropriately scoped to date. And then the town of Oro Valley just wanted to confirm that the Lambert Lane project is recommended for the capacity enhancement category, and then their Shannon Road project is recommended to be moved to the new roadway category. The third item was to identify any of your jurisdiction projects that could be removed or addressed under another RTA next element, such as intersection safety or something like that. Pasquayaki and Citius, actually, all of the jurisdictions responded that none of the projects could be removed at this time. The city of Tucson was in touch with me several times during this process because it was a tight turnaround and they have the most projects, and they wanted me to know that for right now, the process is ongoing and that most of the projects looked good so far. And then finally, the last item was to please prioritize your jurisdictions projects, with one being the highest priority within each group. So again, Pasquayaki Tribe and City South Tucson only had one project, which are both their #1 priorities. The town of Sahuarita had 2 projects, and they were both #1 in their appropriate categories. The town of Marana identified the Cortera Road traffic interchange project as being their #1 priority, Tangerine traffic interchange as their #2, and Ina Road as their #3 priority. ADOT identified under the new roadway projects category, they identified the SR 210 stage 1 and 2 project as their #1 priority, and the SR 210 stage 3 project as their #2 priority. They also pointed out that the Sonoran Quarter was their #3 priority. Pima County also provided their prioritizations under capacity enhancement. They identified Valencia Road as their #1 priority, Thornydale Road #2, Colossal Cave #3, Orange Grove Road #4, and Drexel Road #472 as their 5th priority. And then under the new roadway connections, Pima County identified Irvington Road as their #1 priority and Sonoran Quarter as their #2 priority. Again, the TO Nation, I did not submit any, but we just wanted to make sure they're represented here. And then finally, the town, I do have one more slide with the city because it was larger. The town of Oro Valley identified Shannon Road as their #1 priority under new roadway category, and Lambert Lane as their #1 priority under capacity enhancement. For the city of Tucson, the projects that were submitted in their priority, and what we did is we pulled the projects that were on the list of 37. So as you can see, the city's top 4 priorities are the Drexel Road projects, and then they're followed by Irvington, Campbell, Prince, and La Jolla. And then we pulled the ones 13 and down, which include Speedway Boulevard, Fort Lowell, Mission Road, 22nd Street, 29th Street, Stone Avenue, 12th Avenue, both 12th Avenues, and then St. Mary's Road. And again, the city was in touch with us to let us know that this is still being reviewed and in progress. So again, today's goal is to refine the draft list to bring it within budget. Currently, the list is 290 million over budget. So if there are any questions at this time or any other additional
Yeah, so I just want to add, as part of the ongoing request, last week we had Town of Oro Valley update their impact fee contribution to the non-RTA portion of their 2 projects. So that's reflected in the spreadsheet you have. they identified for both projects, $1 million each for impact fees. So that's updated. That's ongoing. We're continuing to update that as we go. And please let us know as soon as you have that information. Obviously, as we try to balance the budget, the non-RTA portion of the funding helps with the balancing exercise as well. So with that, again, our hope today or our goal today is to really take a look at the feedback you receive and start going down the list and have the same exercise that we've been trying to accomplish the last couple of meetings. What are some of the projects that are lower priority and you would like to provide feedback to both either TMC or CAC at this point? We hope to have multiple CAC meetings over the next couple of months prior to July 1 to be able to finalize this task. So any feedback you provide to them hopefully would make their job a little bit easier. It is challenging. Everybody acknowledges that it's not an easy task at this point, but anything you can do to provide feedback to them, I think they would appreciate that. And with that, I'll ask either Tom as the chair or Mary as the vice chair, if that's what you're hoping to get out of this meeting as well.
No, absolutely. And as soon as you finish that, you can take up the categorical. Not the right time for that, I guess.
All right, so with that, we'll really, Mary, did you want to add anything from a vice chair's perspective?
No, I share his perspective exactly.
All right, thank you so much. Again, just for everybody's information, we have other folks online as well, so feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions, if you want to add anything to the conversation, but we'll open it up to discussion. Anybody is, from your perspective, based on the information that was provided, where do you want to start the conversation? I'm sorry, Mr. Dilly has his hand up. Go ahead, Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the rest of this task force group. I really appreciate everybody's interest to come together and face this daunting task as a unified region. I just quickly, if I could, Mr. Chair, just address the Sonoran Corridor issue. That's kind of more housekeeping in our thoughts as a community. And then I do have a suggestion. I mean, every dollar counts, and I do have a suggestion to shave a little bit off of the bucket that we're looking at. As it relates to the Sonoran Corridor, that project, I think we all have kind of gotten behind it as being generational, but we have to keep it alive, otherwise it'll never happen. It's currently listed as just an ADOT project, but in order, I think, to advance this ball, I would suggest, and this would require the county to be on board as well, but I would suggest that the designated agencies involved in advancing that be the county and the town of Sahuarita. As we continue to move ahead, if there's opportunities by either of those agencies to acquire right-of-way or to take care of our major routes and streets plans to help with the overall delivery of that at some point in the future, I think it would be good for those agencies to be listed. So that's one kind of housekeeping proposal. But as it relates to the cost that we've given there, I mean, $20 million, perhaps we could shave 5 or 10 million off of that, but just keep it alive to be able to keep moving things forward. I think I'll put that on the table for consideration. I wouldn't go more than 10, but I prefer 5. But if 10 is where we land, I get it, and we have to make those types of decisions as a region. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Shane. Just in the way of an update on Sonoran Corridor, ADOT is currently looking at moving that project to Tier 1. which includes identification of the alignment and additional environmental assessment. So that project is active and moving forward. And as Shane mentioned, obviously they're going to continue to work with the county and town of Sahuarita. So that's a good addition. We can do that. We can identify all three as partner agencies. Just for your benefit, our definition of lead agency is exactly that. Who's going to take the lead in planning, design, and construction? Obviously, all other affected jurisdictions are partners at the table, and we'll continue to communicate that to ADOT as well. So as part of your second part of your proposal, any thoughts on that, reducing that number?
Mr. Magumi, I think you said ADOT was going to start the tier 1. It's
Tier two,
correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So tier 2, correct. And I think in addition to Sahuarita and Pima County, a good stretch of that goes through the city of Tucson as well. So I think to that point, Pima County included that on their original requested project list, but it is truly regional. So I would support reflecting it in that way with the multiple jurisdictional partners in addition to ADOT. I think the suggestion that Mr. Dilly made about looking at that dollar allocation is a good one. We had talked about being able to position ourselves for right-of-way acquisition or to be able to use those dollars as a match for federal grant money. So, I'm open to that discussion. I think it's a good one. I don't know what the right amount is, and so if there's some assistance that can be provided by ADOT or from RTA staff in terms of helping to frame up what a dollar amount match might reasonably look like, that would be helpful so that we're not just picking a number for the sake of picking a number. And maybe we can work the other direction too, as we look at the overall list of projects, as we get closer to the target that we're trying to reach, maybe then Sonoran Corridor can fill whatever the remaining amount is that needs to be reduced to get to the 1.1 billion. Just a couple of thoughts.
Well, that's a good approach. Again, as you all know, the entire project is going to be in $1 billion range. So trying to come up with the match at this time with RTA may not be attainable, but obviously at the last couple of meetings, we talked about identifying the right of way. And my understanding was that was mostly for right of way studies, as well as potentially a portion of it can be used for purchase. Yeah, it's up to you. We can come back to that later if you like, or if anybody wants to make it to the $10 million number now and then come back later, that's up to the group.
All of the agencies involved in this need to update their MSNRs or MRNSs, whatever it is, so that we can protect that as development occurs, that corridor, and hopefully reduce the ultimate cost on the project by having development set that right away aside. So certainly those costs could be included in that total number. Thanks.
My suggestion, Shane and Carmine, is we're going to do that we notice what that thought is. So here's my thought or my concern. We get down the road, RTA Next is going on heavy. But this project, for whatever reason, stalls. What happens 20 years from now, and there's still 5 years left in the program, and there's nothing even horizon. So if it's for right-of-way acquisition planning or some high-level scope that we could provide flexibility, I think that we can go out of town. But it keeps.
All right. If there's consensus, we'll change it to 10 for now. And again, as you mentioned, if there's money at the end of the process, you can increase it later as well.
Well, I was actually suggesting the other direction, right, as we work to reduce amounts.
So don't reduce it now.
We have a gap that we need to cover to get down to the 1.1 billion, we could come back with the idea of reducing that.
Determine the amount
Get there,
later.
right?
Okay, that's
Right.
either way is fine. That's up to you all. But so we'll come back to that. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's what I'm suggesting, that I think conceptually what has been discussed makes a lot of sense, and we want to preserve the project. We want to have funds to do meaningful steps along the way to advance that and be positioned for opportunities to attract additional dollars. It's just not taking 10 out right now. It's with the understanding that starting at the lower end, right? Shane suggested 5, no more than 10, right? Working at the bottom up as it's necessitated to get us to that 1.1 billion. I think we're going to have to look at other strategies as well.
Okay, Shane, you hopefully you're okay with that? We'll put it in the parking lot and come back.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
And just so I'm clear, the scope of the work and the improvements would consist of not only the right-of-way acquisition as advanced opportunities, but also those updates to MS&Rs, making sure that those are all consistent so that donations, extractions, all that can be facilitated. So that's a companion piece. It would pay for all those necessary activities.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you again for everybody's benefit. We'll come back to that item. Good conversation. Any other discussions, suggestions for any other projects to look at? You got somebody's hand up?
Patricia Swartz.
Patricia has her hand up, and then Jason, were you gonna? Well, go ahead, Jason. Why don't you go ahead first, then Patricia will come back to you.
Okay. Good morning. So the tribe has one project identified from Camino del Oeste, on Camino del Oeste, from Calle Torme to Los Reales. We have a raise grant on board submitted for that project, and it was deemed a project of high merit. And so the grant amount for that is 14 million. And so, if we do get selected for that project, then obviously there's a portion. It says here it's and I met with Rick earlier, and we had mentioned that we were looking at extending this project from Calle Torme to Valencia Road, and I don't see that reflected on here. The portion from Los Reales to Valencia is just adding sidewalks and some bikeway pedestrian path and at great drainage crossing at Jeffrey and Camino del Oeste. So it's fairly minor. If we do get funded, that's 14 million that we can take off from this amount.
Oh, okay.
We
Great.
have it's a 20% match though, so.
Great, thank you for that. So Rick is tracking scope, budget, all that. We can reflect the latest when we have that information. So thank you for sharing that. All right, thank you. Patricia's on next.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me here. As a CAC member, I kind of wanted to just bring us back to the exercise that we started this with. And I was wondering how these 4 priority categories were determined, and if the jurisdictions are ranking their specific projects by priority anyway, in what way are we meant to use the information from that first question about general prioritization, and how is that exercise serving the goal of projects that support regional collaboration if each jurisdiction is just predictably voting for the goal that kind of most benefits them. I'm also just looking at those results. I'm also just kind of led to wonder if the results of this recent exercise, which I don't think the groupings were necessarily approved by the CAC or whatever, but if the results aren't squaring with the CAC's guiding principles or conversations we've recently been having about viewing projects in a different manner as part of broader categorical elements that do align with our guiding principles, with things like climate change, equity, safety, et cetera, where does that leave the CAC in this determination process?
I'll just maybe ask Carmine to help with that, because at the last TMC meeting, that was a recommendation that came out of the TMC with a suggestion from Carmine initially and a couple other members. I don't want to put it all on you, Carmine, but that was a discussion the TMC had at their last meeting, and what you see is basically responses to those requests from TMC. You want to add anything to that, Carmen?
Sure, happy to. And thank you, Patricia, for the question. I think it, it's important to help guide us to the ultimate goal. And really, this was just an effort in getting current information out of the jurisdiction, sort of a check of where things are from a jurisdictional perspective. That is another source of inputs for the TMC and the CAC to consider as they are going through subsequent discussions. And we are doing this here jointly together. I think, admittedly, out of this, there aren't any big surprises from my perspective in terms of what came back, but this really generated out of a misunderstanding by members of the TMC that the list of 37 projects was prioritized. And when we had discussed that list, not the last meeting, but the meeting prior to that at TMC, the idea was starting at the bottom of the list, working our way up to seek scope changes potentially that could help us with getting within the $1.1 billion budget. And when the realization was made that that was not a prioritized list, then the discussion at the last TMC ensued, and the various questions that went out to the jurisdictions were articulated. So I think that the categorization is yet another way to look at this. And so it may speak to some better than others, right? We don't all think the same way. And so for my linear brain, it helps me to compartmentalize and understand in the various categories where people's priorities are. And so from that perspective, what we have with the updated project list in the category showing the changes from the jurisdictions, what it doesn't do is order them in priority order by category. And I think that would be illustrative to at least see in the capacity category, which are all the ones, and then the twos and the threes and so forth on down there. And then similarly in each of those other categories. And that will enable us to have a conversation and say, right, what's the blend or what's the mix of projects across these different categories? And then we can start moving them into a combined list that is reflective of all of the different components, capacity, modernization, operational, new segments. So, I think that's a broader discussion than any one of us can necessarily set. It needs to be comprehensive, and it needs to be collaborative in getting there. So in other words, do we say, okay, let's go ahead and let's take all the ones from each of the four categories and move those over and start reassembling a list of proposed projects. So this is really an exercise in just trying to move us along. It wasn't an end objective or an end goal. I would ask that we get back the ordering of these projects priority-wise by category. Then we can take that and have some additional conversation. And I think we're going to work on this in this joint group. CAC is going to be meeting, TMC is going to be meeting. We're going to move the ball through those various iterations. I don't think we should expect that we're going to land on a singular approach in one of these sessions. I think it's going to be a combined effort of moving that conversation along, and it's just how do we want to organize creating what would then be a prioritized overall list. And just quite honestly, my view is that we need to ensure that the community is getting a mix of projects that is representative of the needs and the desires of the community, and not just the jurisdictions. And that does come into then needing to look at the other categorical elements. I know we're focused today on the roadway element, and it needs to look at it from an overall standpoint. So I hope, Patricia, that adds some additional light to it. I think that's the value of this ad hoc group, is that TMC is not off talking about things and making statements and CAC doing it separately, but that we can ask one another these types of questions and hopefully converge on an approach that works to get us there.
All right, thank you for that, Carmine, and good suggestion. You do have the priorities by category, by jurisdiction on this handout at the bottom. But as if I hear you correctly, we can reflect that in here as well. So, but you already have the information if anybody needs it for the discussion today. All right, thank you, Abby.
Thanks. And I'm going to actually say my name and who I am because I can't read all your signs. So I'm Abigail Okren. I'm on the CAC. Nobody's going to like what I have to say. So I really appreciate being here, and I appreciate that the TMC is trying to get an orderly list and rank it and go from there. I want to just make sure everybody understands that the way the CAC discussions have been going for months, if not the whole time I've been there, we have been very reluctant to come up with definitive lists. So every conversation that's happened about lists, we've had at least one person, usually more than one person, say, okay, but this doesn't have to be the final list, right? We don't need to talk about this project now, but we can revisit this project later, right? This doesn't mean it's off of the list forever, right? These buckets and amounts aren't permanent, correct? And every single time we have put together something to advance to the TMC or the board that has been with the understanding of the group. And I want to give us credit for this. The CAC is a very diverse group of people, and I think we've done a really good job of trying to come up with a regional approach, but we have been extremely reluctant to come up with that final list. Even that list of 37, those weren't our top 37, not ordered. They were just what we were talking about at the time that we were comfortable talking about. So I would caution this group to get too attached to thinking that those are the definitive projects. And I would also caution you to think that that budget number is final, because at the CAC, we don't think so. I mean, people keep asking for higher taxes and more money, and we know that's a non-starter, but we've also been asking to shift that more into active transportation and to transit. And so these are, I think, obviously we have to winnow things down. We have to get lists, we have to get numbers. The conversations that are happening at the CAC are far more holistic. And so I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that.
Yeah, just to clarify if I could.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, or to add to what Abby's talking about. The CAC recognizes at this point, or at least we've been struggling to get to the point where we can at least take the basic buckets as they've been presented and come up with a way of filling those. That is, naming the projects that would add to 1.1 billion, figuring out how to allocate within each of the categoricals. And then beyond that, to make recommendations to TMC and to the board about the things that Abby was discussing. That is, should the buckets be the size that they are? Should they be much larger? Should they be shifted in some way? But we can't ever get to that point until we do just what you're doing now and what we're continuing to try to do in the CAC, which is to fill the buckets the way they look right now, and then to make recommendations about the adequacy or the decision-making around how those categories get filled. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And Shane has his hand up. Go ahead, Shane. Or somebody else.
Patricia Schwartz.
Okay, go ahead, Shane.
I do believe Patricia was way ahead of me. Her arm's probably getting tired.
Patricia, please go ahead.
My virtual arm, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of respond. So I can certainly appreciate that the roadway categories are a way to look at this, as Carmine said, and I appreciate that explanation. So thank you. I understand the importance of what we're saying, and in terms of the work that we have at hand here. I would just also like to implore that the TMC use the year plus of work that the CAC has done on our guiding principles and other discussions we've been having as an equally important way to look at this ranking conversation. I would just love for that to be brought in a more robust way. And I think this discussion in general is, and how it's been going in the CAC is beyond, roadway projects versus what was previously considered categoricals, and is actually hoping to kind of look at it in a more holistic manner. And yeah, just rereading, the statute about how the CAC is responsible for development of the draft plan, and the TMC provides technical like expertise and consultation. I would love to see a bit more framing of like what the CAC has come up with to guide these discussions, I guess is what I mean.
Okay, we got Shane and then Chris. Go ahead, Shane.
Mr. Chair, and members, I guess I just want to be mindful of the fact that we have timelines that are real in order to get something in front of the voters in 2024. In order for us to have any kind of fruitful conversations about the size of the buckets of money to go to anything, you have to have lists that you feel comfortable with in their right categories. And then you can start whittling down, what monies go to what. And so I guess, Abigail, I love that name. My daughter's name is Abigail. I wonder, does the CAC have a timeline that they're holding themselves to come down to a final list of projects? Because the way the TMC is working is we recognize that there's a looming deadline, that the board has been very clear, and those of us that have been in this game for a while now understand that it's a Herculean effort to put a bond question together for the voters and get publications out and to get communication out and to have any chance of success when those voters hit the polls. And if we're not going to meet that timeline, that's problematic. And so we have to come to lists, in my opinion, and then we can prioritize and we can try to figure out what we can fund and what we can't fund. The holistic, type discussion, I don't know if we have a whole lot more time to be engaging in that stuff. I think we need to have some solidarity in generating lists at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to answer kind of from our point of view and perspective regarding, I think it was Patricia's questions on, how do we rank the categories? And the way that we were looking at it was more from what we thought was the regional, priorities or impacts. And so for us, that's why we did capacity was written kind of in there that, that's critical to the region's transportation network. And then we had new roadway, which was similar. Then operation, we ranked that third just based on, congestion and safety issues. I know that was part of some of the concerns and desires and preferences of the voters, part of the current plan. And then modernization, which is important, but we kind of viewed that more on, on a sometimes local aspect. And then we did wonder if maybe some of those modernization projects are included part of that other $700 million elements and how that might play out to do some improvements over in there. And so that was kind of our rationale. I think some of these projects obviously include multi jurisdictions, which ours the two of ours does, and so and then I would agree with Shane. I'm getting a little concerned on the timeline because I think last time we said we got to go. The goal is to get to the RTA board in July, I believe, and we haven't really cut anything, and since although there are a short 7 months that I've been on this board and participating as part of the committee, I think we've really been struggling to cut kind of any projects and have kind of only added I think we've added projects, quite frankly, and we're happy to have the conversation even on one of our projects, and although it does involve a partnership with Pima County, we're happy to talk about maybe reducing some scope, but I think you're not going to get anywhere near $300 million unless we really start looking at, what are the priorities of the projects on the list. And then I'm a little concerned to hear that the list is not the list, and is that just going to blow up again? And so anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And we have Jamie online as well.
So this is Jamie. I'm one of the members of the CAC. I think I'm gonna disagree with some of my other CAC members. I think the list is the list. We went through an iterative process, and I don't think everybody's exactly happy with the way the list came out. But we went through a grading process based upon our principles and goals, and that's where the ranking came. I think so. So don't worry, Chris. And I would ask the chairperson to speak up on that. But from my understanding of the member, our list is our list. This is a very difficult process. We really wish we had a few more $1 billion, right? I think our assessment showed 15 billion, but we got to get down to 3 billion. And I guess, from my perspective, I would also like to offer that, we shouldn't get distracted with thinking about the other categoricals. We're here today talking about roads, and I guess I think maybe the TMC should concentrate on those things, and we'll get into categoricals later. I think we are a diverse group. We have different opinions. There's some of us want to get from one side of town to the other side of town in the most easiest, fastest way. I think some folks are very concerned about the environmental impacts. I think some folks see a different vision, and we're trying to blend all those together, and it's not always the easiest. So I think this is the best list that we're going to be able to create.
Thank you, Jamie.
That's all. Thank you.
Just to respond to some of the, I think, comments or questions that were raised. Yes, we do have a deadline of July of this year to submit a draft plan to the RTA board. And as you all know, based on the timeline, we are anticipating to go out to the public shortly after that and get feedback from the public on the draft plan itself. And hopefully Tom and Mary, you all as the officers can confirm that the list was voted on by the CAC members. So as Jamie just mentioned, it was a difficult several months to get to that list. But as Jamie mentioned, it was acted on by the CAC, and that's why you have it in front of you.
Yeah, Farhad, I guess all I could really add is that I think it is conceivable that some of the projects in this 37, as I think was just mentioned by Jamie, could be, or from Chris, I guess, could be undertaken in one of the categoricals, say in safety as an example. The modernization projects are good possibilities, I think, for being done within one of those buckets. And from that, that's about the only way I can say that the list, may be somewhat fluid if some of these can be accomplished elsewhere. For instance, if Jason's successful in taking Camino de Oeste off the list and do it through grant funds, those are ways where it can change. But there was one project that was added, the Country Club extension, and we still haven't even gotten a good discussion about that project. So I don't think there's a lot of new projects that are planned to be added. Maybe Abby has some other ideas about that, but at this point, as a committee, we are just dealing with those 37 and trying to come up with however many of them we can get within the budget. And then, as I said before, there's, and as Farhad just said, there are multiple iterations after that, both with feedback from the public and from the board and from TMC, as well as simply our discussions about the categorical elements and how those might somehow come back and impact either budgets or specific projects within the named project category.
Okay, just to make sure I understood your comments. So one of the questions that was asked from the jurisdictions as part of TMC's request was, I believe, what you just described. Are any of these named projects potentially can be an element? And the responses so far are none of them could be. So we'll continue that conversation. Abby, I thought you had your hand up.
I did. People said they were asking me questions. I don't think they were, and I think that Tom is probably the better person to answer what's been happening with CAC. I do want to agree with Jamie that this is just, the road projects are just part of what we are talking about. And I think that the CAC's conversations have been very adamant that we want the whole plan viewed holistically, not just road projects. And that has been, I think, an ongoing source of frustration for everybody at the CAC. And I think I'm probably speaking for most members when I say we'd also love to just be done with that. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with me. I think we'd like to move on past the road projects, but I mean, the issue that Patricia brought up and what I was trying to say before is that we have been trying to view this as a holistic plan, and road projects affect climate change, and they affect safety, and they affect resiliency, and they affect all sorts of other things. And so it is concerning to me when we did a ranking exercise, oh my goodness, like probably 8 months ago at this point, there wasn't a ton of participation on the CAC. I think it was like 18 responses on each particular project. But I think that the projects that we ranked most highly were the projects that provided things like pedestrian enhancement. And that's not the list that we're seeing here. And when we see that the prioritization is capacity building, and we know with predictions of climate change, that putting more cars on the road is not the best idea. I think that it's once again, it's hard for us to view these road projects as a separate thing from a holistic, regional, forward-looking package. They just can't be. I'd also love to just be done with this part and move on, but I think we also want a good package. So I know July is our goal, but I think we'd all rather have something really great to send to the voters that we believe in. And we've talked about this as well. I say this a lot at meetings. I think that if the CAC believes in our plan, that we can sell it to the public. I don't think we need to be throwing in something for voters here and throwing in something for voters there to satisfy people here and there. I think if it's a plan that we think is regionally necessary and thoughtful and forward-looking, we can go and stump for it. So I would much rather us have a really good plan and a holistic plan. I'm personally sick of talking about the roadway projects, and I wish that we could just move on past this, but I don't think that it's not connected to other issues.
Okay, thank you, Carmen.
And Abby, I appreciate those comments. And again, I think that's the importance of us coming together in this setting and talking through these things. I agree that we need to look at this in its totality and all of the different elements. And so the conversation about the road projects has dominated heavily things up to this point at the discussion table. So my thinking is that as the CAC is talking through the categorical elements and right sizing of those dollar amounts in each of the categories, having a prioritized list of projects is beneficial for all of us. And I'm not suggesting that we get to a finalization of it, but if we can get to a prioritization of it, it then gives us the ability to look at the total dollar amount associated with it in priority order. And as the CAC may be recommending, or the TMC may be recommending, increasing dollar values in some of those other buckets, we know how far up the list we have to move, right? If we can come to a meeting of the minds that says, this is a reasonable prioritization of the roadway projects, and as we need to make adjustments, we're going to start at the bottom of the list and work our way up to balance everything out. I feel like that helps to facilitate us getting there. And one of the big unknowns, and Mr. Ortega has raised this at every single TMC meeting, is that we don't have updated cost estimates on the project. So we're going to have to be going through this with that objective, as well as those cost estimates come back to us. that's gonna cause us to have to shed things out of the overall plan. And where does it come from? And if it's gonna come out of the roadway element, I just feel like we are better positioned and prepared to start moving projects out from the bottom of the list, as was the intent 2 meetings ago by TMC when Mr. Dilly made his motion. Start at the bottom and remove stuff as necessitated to meet some of these other objectives. So I don't think these are exclusive, and I'm not suggesting we continue to suck oxygen out of the room talking about roadway projects for no reason. I think there's a value to us being able to prioritize that list of projects, and then it becomes a matter of what's the dollar value in each of the buckets? Where is it coming from? If we need to increase something in one of the other categories and it needs to come out of the roadway projects, we just go in reverse priority order and we start taking stuff off of there. And so that's my thinking there. And it's a means to an end is my view of it. So hopefully that adds some context and helps us not be so concerned about spending more time on the roadway projects. I think it gets us to the balance ultimately that we're striving to achieve.
And just as a reminder, so the conversation at the last TMC meeting and the motion that passed from the TMC's discussion was to really focus on the $1.1 billion budget, try to balance that budget. So unfortunately, some of the CAC members didn't have the benefit of that conversation, but that was the goal of bringing this group together to focus on this task. Mike, and then Tom, did you have some say after that?
No, I don't.
No, go ahead, Mike.
So thanks, and I appreciate the commentary. I think you made a comment though, Farhad, that's not accurate. You said no one has responded and any changes to the scopes. And I think we've noticed too that we're still looking at that. So
Yeah, not
we
yet.
have not responded
Not yet.
with the change because we're not finished and we told you guys that. So I want to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah.
I think the prioritization of the categories, it really speaks to the different chemistry we have in the region. The capacity is number 1 or number 2 on most everybody's list, except the city of Tucson. And you look at that, and that's because we have the urban core, and so our needs are different there. I think that's part of what we're struggling with. And fortunately, the way that change motion was interpreted, where the projects were just cut off the list, they were all city of Tucson projects, you got my attention. And so what I decided is, and I've directed staff to do the exercise that we thought the RTA staff was going to do, which is to look at the scope of those projects, starting at the bottom, if you will, and going up and going all the way. And that does a couple of things. One, it gives us an opportunity to potentially reduce costs and identify is the project scope truly going to be the best investment for the dollars involved. Number 2, Abby's point, and I think Patricia's point, we're not going to stop at the 1.1 billion for the category for the main project. What we're looking at is, as I mentioned at one of the team, I think it's the last TMC meeting, some of these projects specifically listed Ed and Mike improvements, enhancements. Because as I said last time, we're killing people on the roads, and so we've got to address that. So what I've asked staff to do as part of that analysis is not only a change in scope, but also a rethinking of, does it make sense to have some of those pieces in the safety element? See, we should be looking at those where we have some safety opportunities to again, better investment. And so that's our approach. And I will tell you that we'll come back and it will have a component of which will be a hopefully revised list of named projects, but we're also going to start delving very deeply into the categoricals and make a recommendation there as to how it all goes back together as a regional or as a package from our perspective, which is what the conversation, I think, it's always hard, right? When you have to cut, we all do that for a living. We've got to cut back on, we don't have enough money. Wish we did, we don't. Well, we're willing to do that. I think that the way that we'll approach it is looking at a finite number for name projects, categoricals in each of those pieces, and how we can present a package that will address the guiding principles, not only of the CAC, but also the mayor and council. And that's what we're going to plan to do. So we're working on it right now feverishly, trying to get that accomplished. And I will present that to the TMC, and then I will also contact CAC with that. Hopefully that will at least give you an opportunity to see what the prioritization looks like, given a finite number of dollars. I think right now we're just going around in circles. Someone's going to have to make a call. I'll tell you, we're going to look at it with a finite number of dollars. It's not Christmas, so we're not going to do everything we want. But I do think it is important to have a holistic view, and I understand the need for named projects. But I also think that you can't do that, given all of these conversations. We can no longer do that without a conversation, understanding of how the categoricals fit into that to make it a better plan.
All right, I think we got one person online. Patricia, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just want to show some support for what Mr. Ortega just said on revising the list in that manner. That sounds pretty in line with what the CAC has been discussing lately. And I'd love for all jurisdictions to be able to engage in that kind of a process. And I just have a couple points that have been touched on a little bit. I just need to say them explicitly, and then I promise I will hold my peace. Thank you for letting me speak. I definitely appreciate the need. I definitely appreciate the need for decisive action to prioritize these projects that we have in front of us. I just want to be clear that that's like not what I'm pushing back against at all. I'm just very uneasy that climate change, equity, and safety are being relegated to categorical elements with lower budgets, that we're not acknowledging in this conversation, that every road project is deeply relevant to those topics and concerns, as I think everyone in this room knows. And I'm also concerned that insistence on adhering to a determined timeline is potentially sacrificing popular support for this plan. We know that moving around safely and having future livability of this region for generations in the future is important to voters. I just wanted to say those things out loud, and hopefully they will continue to be a part of this conversation at every level. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other suggestions, comments, volunteers for talking about any specific projects? Yes, Tom.
Farhad, suggestion that I might make is to look at each of these categories, the 4 categories, and see if we're able to take those smaller subcategories, if you will, and order them in some way. And then once we've done that, then to try to mesh them together. I think the point of modernization for city being City of Tucson being higher priority than, say, capacity is really important for all of us to consider. I know it's something that has already been mentioned by some of my fellow CAC members. So it's just a next step. How about looking at those individually, put them together, and then see how they can be put back together as a complete list without those categories shown. And one way to do that could possibly be take the top several of each of those categories, call them safe, see what that total is, and then look at how the remainder, how much more we're going to have to take off after that. So as an example, take say the top 5 or 6 modernization projects, and maybe the top 5 or 6 capacity enhancements, et cetera, and putting those all together to say these are projects that are very, very important, want to be preserved, and no matter how far ultimately the board may decide to cut back in order to cut back on the named projects in order to fund more fully some or all of the buckets. We're at least going to know that these are kind of the core projects that we need to preserve here. And that could perhaps makes that final cutting a little bit easier.
I like the suggestion. It's almost a hybrid of what Carmine was saying. If you don't mind, we have time. Let's do that. Let's make a really good productive time out of this meeting. I would suggest let's go down the list. You have first project, Lambert Lane. That's Oro Valley's number one. That goes back to what you were saying. Let's identify that as a number one. That's a capacity project. Help me out here, either Shane or Pocky. Pima Mine Road, Sahuarita is number one on this list. Oh,
From an agency
number one.
standpoint,
That is their number one.
Yeah, so same
Yeah,
thing.
number
That is the
one.
only Sahuarita project in that category. That's number one as well. Ina Road, that is Marana's number three, if I'm correct. South Country Club, as we discussed, that was the one that was submitted by the Airport Authority, so we don't have a ranking on that one. So that one is blank for now. Thornydale Road, Pima County's number what? Number two. Orange Grove, Pima County's number
4.
four. Valencia, that's
County number 1,
number one. There we go. Fossil Cave, Pima County,
3.
three. Then you got the two ADOT projects that are number one and number two. I'm sorry, Cotera Road, TI number one, Tangerine Road number two. Drexel is number what? Drexel,
Is number 5.
number five. All right. So if I understood everybody correctly, that's the exercise. So we'll rearrange them. So you got all the number ones on top, number two, number three, number four, number five. This way they're actually in that order. So just go back and paraphrase what you said. So if we're looking at categorical projects, the lowest ranking categorical project would be Drexel Road based on jurisdictional ranking, right? That's what you were referring to previously. Okay. All right. Let's come back to modernization because you already have that list. You can pull it up again. Out of modernization, there's only one project that is requested to move to new construction, right? That was the Drexel Bridge.
Yes.
Okay, and that's been moved already. So let's talk about that. So the next list you have is new projects. All right, new project, La Vita, that's the only Sahuarita project under that category. That's number one. Irvington, Pima County, number one. Sonoran Corridor, we all kind of debated that's going to be somewhat in the parking lot. How would you rank that one? It was ADOT number 3. How would you rank it as a group? The 3 is good for now.
It was Pima County's number 2 on the new roadway segment.
Yeah.
So I think, somewhere in.
Let's call it
You want to weigh in on your.
Sonoran Corridor. So again, just for reference, ADOT put it down as their number 3. Shane.
it would be our number 3 as well.
Okay, you go good with that?
Yeah.
All right. Drexel Road, this is the bridge. This is the one that moved from a different category to this category. So I would consider that number 1. That's the only City of Tucson project under this category, right? And Sam, that would be your number 1 under this category.
Yeah, that's correct. While we're talking about Drexel though, you notice the city has several Drexel projects in the county as a Drexel project. We thought about maybe combining those into one corridor and having the city and county be co-sponsors of the Drexel Road corridor.
Well, so I would suggest, since we're going through this exercise, let's wait for that. Let's put it in the parking lot. All right, now you got the 2 SR 210s. ADOT's response was those are number 1 and 2. And then Shannon is Oro Valley's only project. That's number 1. Everybody's hopefully following us. So
What
operation,
was, Farhad, I'm sorry to interrupt. What was the Irvington Road for Pima County? I didn't grab that one.
Irvington for Pima County is number one.
Thank you.
La Pieta was number one.
Number one, that's oral, that's South, so, I'm sorry, Rita's only project in this category. Operational on the top of that page, South Tucson's only project, obviously is number one. And then Paspeaki Tribe's only project, that's number one. All right, everybody's following along. And then we go back to modernization, and that follows the list that City of Tucson provided. So let's just, if you don't mind, just read them and then we'll number them on our list here. First one is,
So number one on the city of Tucson is the Drexel Road from Caya Santa Cruz to 12. So that's
what
number
page?
36, let me see. 3650, is that correct, Sam?
54.
Or 54 Drexel Road, I-19, Caya Santa Cruz.
right, 3654 is number one.
Number
All right,
one.
what's number two?
Number two is Drexel Road, South 12th Avenue to Country Club Road,
Okay,
which is
3650.
3650.
Okay,
Number three is Drexel Road, Midvale Park to Caya Santa Cruz,
which number is that?
3649.
Okay,
I don't think it-
No, that's Mission to Midvale.
Oh, sorry. I read that wrong.
Is it in this category? Or is it in a different
No, it's
category?
in the other,
That's the bridge.
oh, that's the one that
Oh,
moved.
that's the bridge.
That's the one that moved.
Okay.
Okay, all right, what's next?
Number,
Three.
yeah, number three. Number four is,
No, this would be three still.
okay, number three. Drexel Road, Midvale Park Road to Caya Santa Cruz.
So we're,
that's the one that's in the other category.
Another
That's number
category.
one in the new segments
that's-
category.
Yeah,
Okay.
that moved.
so just to clarify, what we provided in the spreadsheet, Rocky, is our overall rankings. for
Yeah.
all of our
Right.
projects. We're ranking them within their individual categories.
Now we are, and it's following your prioritization essentially.
No.
We're just numbering it to reflect what category it's in.
And that's the only one, I believe, Sam, that was out of modernization.
So the only one that moved was the bridge.
So then so number four would still be Drexel Road, Mission Road, and Midvale Park, and under modernization.
So I'm sorry,
Drexel.
we're
Road.
renumbering them. So just
Oh.
on the list. So the bridge is now moved. So what's after the bridge?
Okay.
Irvington Road.
So number three is Drexel Road, Mission Road, and Midvale Park.
There we go. That's 3649. What's that?
Number four is Irvington Road, 15th Avenue to Tucson Boulevard.
Okay. And thanks for everybody's patience. I want to do this so everybody's hopefully following the process.
Number five is Campbell Avenue, Benson Highway to Valencia.
Okay, next one.
Number six is now Prince Road, Romero to Country Club.
Okay,
Number seven is La Choya, Star Pass to Ajo.
okay.
Hang on, I just need to find it because I have two lists to edit.
Don't worry about that one. Just focus. on
Number
this.
eight is, oh, okay, then, excuse me, then the city ranked Speedway Boulevard, Alvernon, number 13 on their list. So how do you?
No, what's after La Choya?
Speedway Boulevard.
So now that
Alvernon.
becomes your number 8 on this list.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's what we're doing.
Okay. After Speedway,
After Speedway is number 9, Fort Lowell,
number 9,
Mission Road is number 10,
10,
22nd Alvernon to Camino Seco is number 11,
okay,
29th Mission Road to Southwest Greenway, number 12,
okay,
Stone Avenue, Prince to Drackman is number 13. I drove that today. 12th Avenue, 44th to Irvington is number 14. And then 12th Avenue, Irvington to Drexel is number 15. St. Mary's, number 16.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully everybody's following that based on the conversation and the suggestions that were made. We can rearrange these. So next time you see this table, you'll see from the highest priority all the way down to the lowest priority. So it'll accomplish what Carmine was describing, that if there's going to be a conversation, work your way up from bottom up. All right, thank you for that. I really wanted to have this conversation here in this setting, so we don't have any confusion. Everybody's clear on the intent of that exercise. So having said that, if I understand you correctly, are you ready to dive in and talk about low-hanging projects or not? That's completely up to this group. We can reschedule and talk about it later if you're ready, but
just as a suggestion, start with the number ones, any number ones that show up, and starting capacity. Any number ones, let's kind of list them and add them up cost-wise individually.
Yep, we can do that.
And then look at the number twos and threes, kind of, so that there's essentially three numbers there or so within each of these subcategories. And we can see then if you take all of the top ranked projects, and I think when you get to modernization, you probably want to, if there's 16 in there, maybe do them in groups of 4. Consider that 1 through 4 is kind of the number one in modernization.
So high, medium, low priority,
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah, essentially, maybe 5 of them at a time or something like that.
Again, we have
but
time today if anybody wants to roll up their sleeves and,
we can do that just manually.
yeah, we can do it. We have time. I want to make good use of this time. That's the purpose of a working group, is to roll up our sleeves and do the work.
So Tom, is it all the number ones or the number one in each respective category? So number one's in capacity, number one's in operational, number one's new.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can pull up the spreadsheet and we can do some of that on the fly. I don't want to put you on the spot. The moving of the projects and making the additions, we can do that maybe later, but really appreciate it. If you all have time, I'd rather use this time and really go through this exercise. So please let us know. We're still shooting for another 45 minutes to hopefully accomplish this task. All right, so if I understand you correctly, starting with capacity projects, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 projects that are ranked number 1 by individual jurisdictions. Those 4 projects, if we add up those totals, that'll demonstrate the total cost for those 4 projects. Then we have 1 project, we have 2 projects that are number 2s, and we have 2 projects that are number 3s, 1 number 4, 1 number 5. Can you do that on the fly, or I don't want to put you on the spot? No, don't worry about it.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. We can do it manually. Pull out your calculator, Tom.
So these are. $130.4
There you go.
million.
There you go. For number 1s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to clarify, under capacity enhancement, there are 4 number 1 projects, and the total of those 4 is 38 million. Is that what you said?
No, roughly 134. And again, this is just
I'm sorry, 134 million.
130 point.
130 point.
So just, I want to be clear, Tom. So what do you hope to, what's the next step in that exercise? So we identify, put them in lumps. And the next step in the exercise is that if you're looking at reducing cost, you start from the low hanging fruit, right? That's my assumption.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I just have a quick question about the 2 Marana TIs.
Yep.
These are 100% funded by RTA.
No,
Is there
they're not.
the
They're
100
50-50.
million's not enough for those TIs?
Yeah, they're 50-50. If you look at your list,
Okay,
100 million, RTA, 100 million, ADOT.
thanks. Okay, I see it now. Sorry. Still a lot of money.
All right, so
No offense, Eric.
We agree. It is a lot of money.
Do you want to go down the list, do number 2, 3, and 4? Again, just as an example of what we're looking at. So adding up number 2s, you are looking at roughly 46 plus 200, right? So that's the easy 246.9, right?
Are we doing just RTA amount or total?
Total project cost.
Oh, I was just.
Oh, you did just RTA. Okay, let's just do RTA. Just do RTA, so we're
That's where we
consistent.
have to get.
And how many projects was it? 2?
So that's 146. It's 146.9.
How many
Only
how many projects for HUD? 2 or 3?
It is the Thornydale project and
Portero?
Otero Road.
Portero, got it, thank you.
That's 146. Number 3s are only 2 as well. And that's 57 plus 18. Somebody's got a calculator handy if you want to do that. So we're just doing this as an example. Obviously, we'll do the rest later.
75.2.
Okay. And then
I would stop there.
you stop there. Okay. All right. So would you mind explaining again, what would be your next step? So we got these 3 groupings of prioritized projects.
Do the same thing for each of the subcategories. So modernization, if we take priorities 1 through 5, 6 through 10, and 11 through 16. Consider those to be
Add those up.
kind of sub buckets, if you will, within.
Or high, medium, low. Okay. Okay, so hopefully everybody's following the conversation, and this really helps. And we can do that. We'll send it out by email. This helps the conversation. And again, it's a tough decision, but I'll go back to, I think Shane has mentioned this several times. Carmine mentioned it a couple times. At some point, we're going to have to balance this budget, and this would give you the tools to do that.
So Tom, to your point, this is just creating separation or segregation, correct? That's all it does, is just separate within each of the 4 categories.
Yeah, because at some point you have to shuffle the decks together, because you can't just start, even though, in my view anyway, even though the near consensus of the region has been, or at least of the individual jurisdictions has been, that capacity was number 1. It doesn't really make sense to me, at least, to start with capacity, go all the way to the bottom and see if there's anything left, then to go to whatever's next, operations, I think, because you'll never get even to modernization at all. So that's obviously a non-starter for everyone in the room, I'm sure. So I think if we start with the top third of each of those categories and see what those come out to, you start to get an idea of high, low, and medium, or high, medium, and low, as Farhad's been describing it, of priorities within them, and group them together, shuffle those decks together, in other words.
Great, thank you for clarifying.
Was that consistent with what you were thinking too as well, Carmine?
Yeah, I think it's a evolution, so I'm comfortable with it. I think one thing, we skipped over South Country Club. We didn't assign it.
Yeah, so as mentioned several times, that was submitted by the airport authority. It was discussed at the CAC meeting. It was voted on. It's included on the list. But since then, we've had requests from CAC to have more conversation on that project at the CAC. So we hope to do that. So you can assume that's their first priority, but I don't know how you want to assign a priority to that. Any other suggestions, thoughts? Again, we have time. I would rather use this time to really drill down deeper if you like. Abby, you have a question?
Yeah, I know this is not going to be mine to vote on at the TMC, but I'm wondering, in addition to looking at sort of the ranking as a way to cut, I don't know if you're all also gonna just consider the cost. I saw Tom Blanche at the $100,000 requests for some of the projects. And I'm looking through some of these other projects where there's only like a $9,000 request. So cutting out a single $100,000 request. Brings up a lot more room. $100 million? Do I always do this?
All these are.
I always do this. Yeah, I always do this.
Add three zeros
Okay.
to everything.
You know, I'm like, God, that is so cheap. You know, point being the same though. I mean, are you all going to consider not just ranking, but how much some of these projects actually cost when considering removing them?
So part of the challenge, and I'll speak for some of our jurisdictional members, I think, well, you go ahead, you had your hand.
Yeah, so Mr. McGinnity, Abby, to your question, actually, I do have a separate question. The projects that were submitted and those that happen to be within the town of Marana have been identified as priority projects based on need. Those that are going to garner what we believe to be the widest value from an overall community support standpoint. That's a significant portion of the issues or challenges that we get are for those named projects. They just happen to be some of the more expensive projects on the list. The question that I do have, and as we kind of go back through our projects, and we did go through our projects, but one of the things that would be helpful for me as we go back again is if and where there is an opportunity, as Mr. Ortega had mentioned earlier, as the city of Tucson is even going through their projects, as there are opportunities to peel pieces of projects off, how do we ensure that those pieces of the project come back? And I think that would be helpful as we consider it, you know, within a TI reconstruction, there are safety elements, there are other elements associated with that, but how do they get married back?
So as we discussed at the TMC meeting 2 meetings ago, that was the conversation, right? No, I want to remind everybody, that was the conversation, and we went through that exercise, identified out of 13 projects that the only components that would fit in these buckets were intersection improvements. So we pulled out 7 intersection improvements. We said, in lieu of doing these 13 projects, you can do 7 intersections to at least meet the goal and objectives of improving operation of those intersections. So that was the exercise. And what you're describing would be a similar exercise. And that, how do you guarantee that those intersections, for example, in this case, are going to be included in the plan? And that's only by policy. So the RTA board, by policy, we have administrative code. In the administrative code, they would reference those projects, and they would say that within the next 20 years, future RTA boards will prioritize these 7 projects within the bucket. And then they would obviously reference that moving forward with the future boards as well. That's the only way to do it. The goal has always been for these buckets to be flexible, so the governing body has the opportunity to prioritize those projects when the need comes up. So if you have an intersection 10 years from now that you haven't identified, they have the opportunity and the capacity to prioritize that project at that time. Yes.
Eric, I appreciate your answer, but it brings up another question for me. So I just want to be clear. The expensive projects have popular support among people in Marana, right? So I think if we're considering that, Tucson actually has 10 times the population of Marana. Is that something that you guys are looking at when you look at these projects, is how many people it affects? Because there's all sorts of factors going on here. There's cost, there's where the jurisdiction ranks it themselves, there's where it fits within all the other policies and sort of holistic regional goals. And then there's the population. So I don't know how that's all being taken into account. I can say, like, for me, when I was ranking everything, some of the things that I gave the highest rankings to were absolutely not regional, but they were like a railroad crossing in Marana that I'll never use. But that seemed very important to me because it seemed like a direct safety impact. But when we're looking at this as part of a regional plan, how are we putting that together if we're not considering population?
So I think you touched on it, Eric. Really the focus, or at least our hope, is that individual entities are putting forward projects that they recognize have the highest need, and they prioritize it through their own process. And we'll be happy to have that conversation when we get closer to a final list to provide a narrative on why those projects are the highest priority. So when we're out there talking to the public, we can use that information to educate the public about why the project has been identified through this process, ultimately making it to the final list, because we owe that to the public. We'll have to describe to them not only the process, but also the benefit and the reason those projects are on the final list.
Comment, question, and suggestion. So, like Carmine said, I appreciate the way that we organized these projects in these 4 categories. And just a reminder, though, these 4 categories just showed up recently. And so while I like this exercise of prioritizing within the categories, I don't want to lose sight of the overall prioritization of our projects. With the city having most of the projects in modernization, and our top 4 priority projects are all the Drexel Road corridor projects, that should also be taken into consideration as we shuffle the deck, like Tom talked about earlier. I appreciate what Eric said about picking projects that are supported by the community. Our projects were based on our Move Tucson Mobility Master Plan that we did widespread outreach, and these are all very high-ranking projects based on the input we got from City of Tucson residents, and that's why these were submitted and ranked accordingly. So I did just want to give a plug for that. Lastly, a question I have is, as we're doing all this, I know there's a concurrent process where HDR is doing the cost estimates for all of the projects. When do we think that process is going to be concluded, so that we can then take these numbers that we're all basing everything off of to compare to what they might actually be? Because my fear is we're going to have to do this all over again. So what's the timing of that?
So it's an ongoing process, as Carmine suggested. Once we have that information, we're still going to have to go down the list, work our way up. So this helps set us up for that process. As far as timing goes, the sooner we give them a shorter list, the quicker we can get them to come back. So having 37 projects, obviously, is going to take them a little bit longer. The quicker we can get them a list that is more realistic, the quicker they can come back. Rick, any other?
The only other thing I would add is that we are starting the detailed discussions on the initial drawings, the development, the concepts that have been, we're doing 3D simulations. So we're just starting those efforts today with the meetings, the feedback, and the sharing of that, and the over-the-shoulder reviews. Once I get a better feel for how long that takes, I'll be able to tighten up the timeframe on it. It'd be a fool's guess to even offer up anything right this second.
But I would add to that ultimately, and we talked about this at the last meeting, ultimately the RTA board has the authority to look at the list and come back and say, all right, we're going to have to bump another project off the list. They can have that discussion. They can make that last adjustment. So it's not all on the CAC to have 100% complete plan. It's still a draft plan. The board will finalize the plan with those considerations. And I go back to, the sooner we give them a shorter list, the quicker they can do the work. So if there's anything here that anybody's willing to remove, let's let them know. And if you're not willing to remove them, then that's adding to their time for doing that this time.
Just by hand, I looked at the 1s, 2s, and 3s. If I take all the number 1 priorities, and don't count on this being very accurate, but it may be close, you get 562 million for the number 1s that we listed. I get 467.3 million for the number 2s. Now, for the number 2s, I'll mention that there are none in operations because there were only 2 projects. They were both number 1s, so there's nothing in operations in these number 2s. And also, there's only 1 new project in the number 2s. And, that one was SR 210 stage 3. So, that So the two of those together then is 1 point. That we have.
1.29 or 1.0.
So 1.0,
Basically,
1 billion,
billion.
basically.
Yeah.
So if all the number ones now across all the categories, all the number twos across all the categories.
Yeah.
Totals up to $1 billion.
Yeah, now, if I could, let me just read the projects that aren't on this list at all, and you're gonna see, well, we can't do without that, I'm sure. But
So I'm sorry, before you do that, so only number ones and number twos you're saying are adding up to 1.1 billion.
0.0
1.0.
Okay,
1.0.
all right, thank you.
So capacity projects that are missing include Ina Road from Marana, Colossal Cave Road from I-10 to La Malta, Orange Grove Road in Pima County. And of course, Country Club. And then the Drexel Road Bridge, I guess, which we said was a number 5. But I was thinking about that later. Is that?
This
number-
is not
that's
the
number
bridge,
5 for
this is
Pima County?
472 you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not the bridge.
Oh, okay. That's Cardinal to Mission. Right. Okay.
So, and that demonstrates the importance of prioritizing the categories as well, right? Yeah. So that's hopefully an exercise we can continue to discuss, that which categories are the highest priorities, and then keep working our way down the list.
Yeah, so the ones missing in modernization total 144 million. Whether those can go into the safety bucket, and be absorbed there is a question, I think, for TMC really. And then finally, on the new projects, the ones that would be missing from either of these priorities would be the Sonoran Corridor. However, if we have still space remaining up to the 1.1 billion that the board had said, that might be one that could fit in there. And that's it.
I wasn't counting. How many projects make up that 1 billion? Roughly.
Somewhere around 25
25.
plus.
Okay, approximately. Thank you.
So we'll definitely coordinate with Tom and finalize the table and send it back out to everybody by email, so you're all looking at the same information. I personally feel that hopefully that'll get you a little bit closer, but I guess this is a question for the group or a question for TMC members. Since this is a request to provide feedback to the CAC, are you comfortable to provide feedback to the CAC based on that, or do we need another meeting of this group before we do that?
I feel like we need to see the roll up of it and then have a conversation around it.
With this group again.
Yes. Can I ask, on the modernization projects, which of them made it into, you had said previously 1 through 5?
1 through 10.
1 through 10?
Yeah, the number 1 priorities I considered to be 1 through 5. Number 2 priorities were 6 through 10.
And what were those totals? I may have missed that. 1 through 5, what
1
was
through
the-
5 was 167.5 million for modernization. And 255.5 for the number 2s. That's the 6 through 10.
That helps. That's a good way of.
Back on capacity, by the way, the number 1s were 130.4, as we mentioned before.
I had that.
And the number 2s were 146.9. And on the news, the new ones, 182.5 were the number 1s. The number 2s were just the one project at 64.9. And the two operations you have there is 81.6. So all those together that I just mentioned come out to $1 billion.
Good approach. Thanks for everybody's participation. Hopefully this was productive. Again, I ask that you look at how you would prioritize those categories, because I think that's going to be critical. As part of our conversations, we've been talking about, making sure that we can justify any other prioritization exercise as well. So we'll take what we have so far, but think about for the next discussion how we can expand on that conversation. Yes,
Can I ask, I know that yesterday was a deadline for us to get you input on federalizing projects. I know that Pima County responded.
Yes.
Do you have just a brief summary on what?
Of course, we only had one request, and this is for everybody else's benefit. These are the 4 projects from the current RTA plan that are directed by the RTA board to move forward to RTA next. In the meantime, the direction from the board was to identify if there are other funding opportunities, and we put a request out for all jurisdictions. Pima County was the only one that submitted a project that potentially could use federal dollars. That's the First Avenue from Orange Grove to Ina, and that helps the equation a little bit. So, but that's about roughly $10 million. So we'll include that in future conversations.
Farhad, did we want to try to schedule another follow-up meeting while we've got everybody?
Well,
here, or do we need to put some
I'm
time?
hoping if you're all available, let's shoot for next Wednesday at 9 o'clock. That was the initial date and time for the regular TMC meeting. But if you recall, in lieu of having that TMC meeting, we'll have this working group again. And hopefully come prepared. We're still looking at 200, maybe $80 million now to continue to cut. I can't thank everybody enough. This is difficult. This is not going to be an easy decision, but I think with all of you at the table, we can get there. Shane, you had a comment or a question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Next Wednesday works totally perfectly for me, so I appreciate the opportunity to engage. Tom, as you looked at the capacity enhancements and did your quick math, all the number 1s for that, all the number 1 ranked projects in that category, this is capacity again. What was your total amount?
For the number 1s?
Yeah. Yeah.
I had 130. There's the mistake. Told you this, you shouldn't count on it.
We'll do the math and send it out, but I think we get the.
So the concept, okay, great. All right, never mind then. Hey,
Sorry, I missed that. That was. a
no,
mistake.
it's good. I'm impressed at your ability to just do that on the cuff, Tom. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you again, everybody. Appreciate you making out, more time to meet. So hopefully next week, Wednesday at 9 o'clock, we'll see you here again, either in person or virtually. Yes, Jason.
So I just wanted to ask Rick, what timeline do you have for your time estimates that HDR is not estimates, cost estimates that HDR is putting together for the?
I won't know it until after we get the first round of all these feedback meetings scheduled in. We've tried to jam that in, but that's going to be occurring over the next, I think, 3 weeks. And then I'll get a better idea of how much it's going to take for them to digest what comes out of all this, and then putting the rest of it on. So we're trying to be cognizant of the timelines the board's operating with and respectful of all this. I just don't want to offer up something I can't deliver, because we haven't had the first of those meetings and discussions. I'll know more after we go through them.
As I mentioned, keep in mind, even after that, and we did this last time, back in 2006, we did an initial cost estimating with our consultant, and then we came back and we finalized the list, and we went back and double check everything with the second round of cost estimating. So that process is ongoing. It'll continuously provide input into this process. So I don't want folks to be too concerned about that because that's ongoing and the board will make the final decision. Do you have your hand up, Mary? I'm sorry. I'm starting to see things.
Mr. Mogimi, when we get together a week from today, in the materials that are distributed, in addition to the stuff we talked about today coming back, if we could get the summary of where the other element dollars or dollar amounts are so that we can have all of that in.
You have that at the bottom of the sheet currently. It's the highlighted section at the bottom of this sheet.
Perfect.
Is that
Okay.
what you-
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Sam. You had a question? No. All right. Again, thank you, everybody. Tom, go ahead. I'm not rushing anybody. We got a few minutes.
So the correction of my completely off the cuff is that we're actually at 1.12 billion. I forget what was the number the board said.
1.12. Yeah. But again, if you recall, obviously there is a little bit of flexibility. The board.
I just thought it was interesting that that's what the number.
Yeah,
seems
and
to be.
where that came from was subtracting from the carryover project. So that's why it's not an exact number. It's a balancing of the two carryover projects as well as the new project.
Just to clarify, Carmine, you said a week from today, we're meeting, it's Wednesday is our next.
Next Wednesday, I'm sorry, it's today's Thursday.
Oh, that's what I was gonna
Next
say.
Wednesday at 9 o'clock, our regular TMC meeting time, we're gonna have this working group in lieu of regular TMC. Any other questions, comments?
We also have a PAG meeting that day.
Probably not, because we're trying to get this taken care of, so we'll continue to coordinate and see what,
Will it be a TMC meeting with the CAC members invited?
no,
or
it's this working group, there's this working group. We're still trying to get this working group to make a recommendation to either CAC or the TMC. All right. Thank you again. Anything else before I finish around the table?
I don't know when our next CAC meeting is, and TMC members might want to know that as well.
I don't have the date, but I think it's
The moment of the meeting.
15.
May 15th is when it's
May
scheduled.
15th.
Thanks, Pocky.
And more reason to meet next week, so hopefully we'll have something for the CAC.
But only if the working group's complete.
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
coordinate that with the
Sorry, Pocky,
CAC
is that
chair.
at 3 to 5 or at 11? Okay, thank you.
We'll coordinate all that with the CAC chair and get back to everybody by email. Again, last opportunity. Anybody online? Carmen, go ahead.
Just if, when we get this back and we get it in addition to PAP also in cells, that'd be great.
We're gonna share on Tom's handwritten
Okay.
math as well. No, just kidding. Anything else? Thank you.
Farhad, this is Jamie.
Yes,
I just want to say thanks to the TMC for inviting some of the CC members. I think it just enriches the conversation and the decision-making process. So thank you.
thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for participating. With that, we're gonna adjourn the meeting. Thank you. All right.